All right, Krystal, what's on your radar?
Well, as I explained yesterday, all week I'm delving into the best and worst case scenarios for the next 4 years under either Trump or Biden. And fortunately for us all, I think the worst case scenarios are the most likely with either one of these guys to ultimately play out. Why? Well, because in the worst realistic case, they just continue the habits and patterns that have frankly made them awful their entire lives and careers. Inspiring stuff there. Yesterday, I explained how an incrementalist, corporate-friendly Biden would allow economic pain and inequality to fester, solving none of the problems which brought us Trump in the first place and sowing the seeds for an even more terrible version of our current hell. The worst case scenario for Trump doesn't really require any imagination because, frankly, we're living through it right now. As I recently laid out, unlike some on the left and the never Trump right, I don't view Trump as a Hitlerian figure so much as a late-stage capitalism nightmare, the ungodly combination of celebrity culture, reality TV, and consumerism as a religion. He's not cut from the cloth of dictators, strongmen, and fascists like Hitler, Mussolini, or even Viktor Orban or Bolsonaro. He's cut from the cloth of Wendy's, get-rich-quick schemes, and 90s episodes of Cops. Now, that's not to say he's not dangerous, mind you. Late-stage capitalism is quietly murdering Americans every single day. It's killing us through a food system built around addiction and binging rather than nourishment, a healthcare system designed to make you a good customer with lucrative chronic conditions, a consumer culture meant to create ever more insecurities rather than satisfy your needs. So, while some would lay on a Trump second term ending in the literal end of America and any dissenters or minorities herded into camps, I don't actually see that as a realistic scenario. But that doesn't mean a second Trump term is something we should consider casually or embark on cavalierly. Look, what do we know about this man at this point? He is not the authoritarian nightmare that his most excitable critics fear. If he was, he could easily have seized on COVID to institute whatever lockdowns and crackdowns he wanted. He's too bumbling and incompetent with literally zero follow-through to actually execute some sort of authoritarian turn, even if he wanted to. As Matt Taibbi writes, he might not have a moral problem with the idea, but 2 minutes into the plan, he'd leave the room, phone in hand, to throw on a robe and watch himself on Fox and Friends over a cheeseburger. Even so, he is nonetheless awful and destructive and has exacerbated and fueled every single division in this country. Armed clashes between rival political gangs unfolded repeatedly on our streets this summer. No, this is not going well. As has been abundantly clear in the last couple of months, Trump has all the divisive and ugly rhetoric of a right-wing demagogue, matched with the radical libertarian corporatism of the Kochs and the attention span of a toddler. He thinks he can confidence game COVID away. He celebrates the extrajudicial murder of a far-left activist and then offers a second-term agenda of cutting the capital gains tax rate.
It's going to disappear. One day it's like a miracle. It will disappear. And from our shores, it could get worse before it gets better. It could maybe go away. We'll see what happens. The U.S. Marshals went in to get him. And in a short period of time, they ended in a gunfight. This guy was a violent criminal.
A lot of them out there.
And the U.S. Marshals killed him. And I will tell you something, that's the way it has to be. There has to be retribution when you have crime like this. We're looking at also considering a capital gains tax cut, which would create a lot more jobs. So we're looking very seriously at a capital gains tax cut.
What we will call his unique qualities and approach have brought out the worst in almost everyone. Under Trump, the right has embraced militias and conspiracy theories and celebrates people like Kyle Rittenhouse showing up to a street fight and shooting 2 protesters. Liberals have become completely unhinged under Trump, embracing censorship, their own set of more tasteful media-sanctioned conspiracy theories, and a complete abandonment of all principles outside of get rid of Orange Man. The far-left Antifa acolytes with a self-aggrandized view of themselves as warriors and a radically overblown view of Trump's actual strongman capabilities are also spoiling to find meaning in a fight. Regardless of who wins the election, we may well be in for another period of unrest, but I do think the chances are higher with a Trump reelect. Liberals are not mentally prepared whatsoever for Trump to win again, and will no doubt cook up some Russiagate-type way to try to remove him from office or delegitimize him, which will provoke a right-wing backlash. We're all too drugged up on sugar and alcohol and Netflix and actual drugs for this to devolve into a full-blown conflict, but that doesn't mean it couldn't be ugly for some significant period of time. In terms of actual governance and legislation, you can expect to get exactly what Trump promised: nothing. When he was asked by Sean Hannity about his second-term agenda, he literally could not name one single thing, instead offering, one of the things that will be really great, the word experience is still good. The word experience is a very important word. Now, at least with 2016 Trump, I thought maybe we'd get some infrastructure, decent approach on trade. This time, he's running purely on rhetorical culture war. I said yesterday Biden would be grand bargains forever. Trump will be the McCloskeys, Antifa bashing, and an inability to condemn various white supremacists forever. Cable news will follow the president's lead and continue to fuel cycles of pure hatred toward our fellow citizens. Every remaining government institution with a shred of trust will be destroyed, making it almost impossible to convince the citizens that government can ever be a force for achieving positive societal and communitarian goals. Any project seeking to unite a multiracial working class in a social democratic agenda will be obliterated by the hardening lines of cultural divisions. On foreign policy, the dynamic with Iran is frankly frightening. As Trita Parsi has argued here, Trump's decision to withdraw from the Iran nuclear deal, assassinate Qasem Soleimani, and push that country to the brink economically has strengthened the hand of Iranian hardliners who are almost certain to take over in the next election there. It's not hard to imagine the president's hubris and ego leading us once again to the brink of war and possibly beyond. Trump, of course, continues to pledge that he's getting us out of Afghanistan. But after 4 years of hearing such promises, you would be a fool to actually believe it. Wholesale plutocracy, civil unrest, increasing illiberalism all around in reaction to an ever-increasing sense of world-is-ending politics. With credibility in the FDA destroyed, the pandemic continues to rage as a critical mass of Americans refuses to get the coronavirus vaccine. All the while, of course, climate change will march on completely unchecked. And the Democratic Party, backed by CNN and MSNBC, will run around telling everyone that this time the way to defeat Trumpism is through Mike Bloomberg or John Kasich. After all, they will have, of course, blamed Trump's re-election once again on the left, claiming that the real problem was that AOC made Joe Biden too radical. I'm not kidding. That is definitely what they will do. Now, if this is the accelerationism that some leftists have in mind, you can count me out. And by the way, what I've spelled out is far from the ceiling in terms of how bad it could get, what possibilities are out there. Near constant street clashes and other ideological violence egged on by the president, a significant war which actually reaches our own shores, nuclear holocaust. Those are things that are all potentially on the table. What I've described as sort of the median bad scenario, and the likely horror interspersed with clownishness, undergirded by virulent corporatism, is not something that anyone should be wishing on our nation. And Sagar, I mean, it's not hard to imagine what Trump Part 2 looks like. It's just a continuation of what we're living right now. And I don't think anyone could argue. I mean, if you look at the polling, very few people can argue that the country is headed in a good direction.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, look, the best case for Trump is not anything that he's going to do. It's all the things that he's not going to do. I mean, you want to live in a country where you're going to have a quasi-open border? You should vote for Joe Biden. Like, you want to live in a country where they have
Joe Biden's not going to do anything.
Yes,
Come on.
He certainly is with his immigration. His immigration moratorium is basically, I mean, it's the most far-left immigration policy we'll ever have. It's not Bernie policy, but it's still bad. You want to live in a country where 11 million illegal immigrants are going to get citizenship? You should vote for Joe Biden. You want to live in a country where, like, the 1619 Project gets celebrated at the White House?
They couldn't get that through, even under Obama, when you had Marco Rubio and these other people in favor of it.
Like, look, maybe you're right, but, like, it's a risk, and, like, some people don't want to take that risk.
So what do you see, though, as the worst possible outcome of a next Trump administration?
The worst possible outcome?
Yeah.
I mean, basically now, right? Like, this is the worst possible outcome. You don't take the pandemic seriously. You polarize public opinion against all the legitimate things that you ran on, like trade and immigration and all these other things. That's the worst possible outcome.
Yeah.
That it is. But I'm saying that worst possible outcome is still not as bad for some people.
Sure.
Than Joe Biden.
Look, sure.
Yeah.
And I'm not even making a comparison here. I'm just laying out, I laid out Joe Biden's worst possible outcome yesterday and Trump's today, and I'm going to do the best for both of them over the next couple of days. But I do think from your perspective, I'm curious because part of the risk of Trump representing the nationalist right is, I mean, he has actually, if you care about immigration, he has moved opinion left on immigration.
Yes.
He has nuked that country. I mean, there has been a tremendous backlash to him, and maybe I should put this in my Trump best case scenario in terms of thinking about it from the left. He has moved public opinion left on a variety of issues. So if you're, representing the populist right or the nationalist right, like that has actually been a disaster for your side. And he has discredited in some ways the philosophy underlying it.
No question. Same on trade, same on a lot of racial issues, same on a lot of class issues. But I mean, like I said, the real question in your mind is everything so far gone that you might as well just stick with this guy and have him up for 4 years? Or are you going to risk Joe Biden administration? Joe Biden's an old man. Kamala Harris could be president. That sounds like a nightmare to me. And so
Kamala doesn't believe anything either, so don't worry about it.
And yet, she's controlled by a lot of people who we talk about on the show, oligarchs and all these others. And like I said, if you think that is a possibility for a lot of people, voting for Trump is like, it's basically a bulwark against it. I don't think that's a very good case.
Yeah.
It's not a particularly affirmative one, which a lot of people want to vote for. I guess you would also keep the China tariffs, but the worst case scenario is what we got. The worst case scenario is a president who governs like Paul Ryan and Mitt Romney, who discredits many of the nationalist principles that he ran on, and yet, in some ways, he's dramatically changed public opinion. He changed the Republican Party, forever polarized it, the electorate amongst class lines. So, it's a terrible choice, right? It really is. I've just, got to represent, like, some people. There are a lot of people who I know, and you could see this within the Trump base, who do look at it as existential, who did in 2016, and I think they were right. And if you thought it was existential then, it probably is right now, too.
Yeah, I know there are a lot of people that feel that way, and I'm not discrediting that view. But look, we've got 200,000 plus Americans dead. Not all of that could have been avoided. Some of that could have been avoided, though. You've got massive economic hardship. You've got a guy that's failed to step up to the plate in terms of getting stimulus on the table. And so, look, maybe we don't have another pandemic come around. Maybe enough people take the vaccine so you get this one under control and life can return back to normal. But it's impossible to imagine another 4 years of Trump without thinking about the country further coming apart and fraying at the edges and that social cohesion continuing to unravel. Where does that lead? I don't know, but I don't think it's a good place.
Yeah, well, the question is it going to continue to unravel under Joe Biden? And I think the answer is yes. And so that's it's like, which unraveling do you want?
Maybe.
I think that's actually
maybe, but I would argue it's much more certain under. He just always. He can never resist.
No, he can't.
Ripping it apart.
Pours gas on the fire.
He can never.
Does.
Joe Biden, you get this general milquetoast, standard issue American political rhetoric that does have an impact in terms of calming the waters and at least cooling some of the tensions. Look, as I argued here yesterday, I think you can end in disaster there too, because ultimately, you get some more unified rhetoric, but ultimately you don't do anything to address the problems that created Trumpism. But Trump is not only going to not address those problems, he's also going to continue to exacerbate and inflame. So, as you said,
it's a terrible choice.
It's a terrible choice.
Yeah.
Next on Rising, The Intercept's Ryan Grim is going to tell us the Congressional Progressive Caucus is regrouping. He'll lay out that plan when Rising continues.